Thank you. And I guess everybody knows that the Reverend Mark has deferred this week, at least as long as need be.
Depending on how long we go, we might squeeze in a little bit at the end, but we don't have to, so.
We've all been following events in the Richard Glossip case, papers and in the news, broadcast media, and there's been a lot going on lately. And I met his wife, Lea Glossip, up in the foyer after church a couple of months ago. Didn't get a chance to visit very long, but as this has continued to ramp up, we just thought an idea might be for this class, since we're into deep subjects and thinking, we do the Bible. So that's pretty deep sometimes. To invite Mrs. Glossip to class to discuss current happenings in the case, maybe a history for some of us that aren't well read on it or fortified, and her particular situation. I did not know she's a law student and currently attending classes, I guess. So it's a much deeper story, I think, overall than just what we've been able to pick up in the papers and in the news and everything. So with that, Lea, I just asked her to come in and she can present, and I presume that we're free to ask questions as we go. And welcome, Lea. Glad to have you.
Thank you. No, I'm glad to be here. So Boston Avenue has been so grounding for us in a lot of ways. Richard has been a member here for almost 10 years now. The service on Sunday is broadcast over TV, so he's able to watch it from TV from his prison cell. So he watched the service for years and years and years, and eventually he wrote Reverend Wiggs a letter and said, "I watched your service." He introduced himself and he said, "Can I be a member of your church?" And Reverend Wiggs drove down to see him. They spent almost 8 hours together. And Richard still laughs about that he sat in that little uncomfortable chair for almost 8 hours with him. But they connected in that time and spent that time. And Reverend Wiggs got to know him and walked through exactly what the situation was. And that was before all of this happened, before legislators got on board, before lawyers got on board. So that's really meaningful for Richard that Reverend Wiggs was one of the people who listened to him and gave him that time of day before a lot of people did. Then when we got married, it was important for us to be part of the same church. So that's how I became a member here. I live in Oklahoma City, so I don't get to be here in person as often as I'd like, especially during the semester. But every Sunday I watch the service on the YouTube live feed. And he watches on TV, so we sit over the phone together, and that's our Sunday ritual with our coffee, and we watch and participate in church together that way. So that's our moment together. So yes, and last summer we did a forum here. I don't know if any of you were able to hear.
On the Zoom,
Yes,
because they zoomed
yes.
it, and I couldn't come down.
Yes.
I got to see it.
And that was also a very different time from where we're at now. But that was also, again, Reverend Wiggs agreeing to stand with us and take a public stand, really means the world to us. And just knowing that he's been standing with us personally, and with us all the way, has been amazing, as is everybody here that we connect with and speak to and talk to. So that's important, and again, important why I'm here today too. It's meaningful to both of us. And I know Richard wanted to participate if he could, a little bit short notice, otherwise we would have tried to figure out how to do that.
By the way, Lea,
Yes.
we're Zoom recording this
Okay.
class, so
Okay.
it'll be available on the website.
Okay.
Playback.
Okay, good.
Church website.
So that makes a difference. But yeah, so I know it's very complicated what's going on. I know it's hard for a lot of people to understand what exactly is happening. But in essence, to kind of give a little bit of groundwork as to what happened is when you're on death row, everything you have to do is within strict time limits. And essentially, nobody ever did the work on Richard's case within the time limits. By the time anybody listened and agreed to look into his case, the doors were all closed. And it doesn't matter if you're innocent, if you have evidence of innocence, all that matters is deadlines. And in part, that's why I have tremendous respect for his lawyer, Don Knight, who was the one that said, I will take this case anyways, I have to find a way. Because when he first met with him, he said, I don't know if you're innocent, but I'm gonna find out. And he went and he did the work, and then he came back and he says, you were telling me the truth, and I'm gonna do whatever I can for you. And he's worked for almost 8 years now without pay, pro bono, just giving everything he's got. I think over 7,000 hours he's put into this case.
Was he court appointed, Lee, or was
No,
this somebody that Richard chose outside?
Purely pro bono. It was, he heard about the case through other people in the community saying somebody needs to step up, because at the time, Richard had 30 days to live and he had nobody doing anything. And so he got in there at the last second and said, okay, let me see what I can do. But there was really nothing that could be done at that moment. And by really what was a miracle, they had the wrong execution drugs. And at the last second, the executioner refused to use the drugs on Richard, which is the only reason he's still alive right now. At the last second, someone said, I can't do this, I will not do this. And that ended up with this unofficial moratorium for almost 7 years where no executions happened. But that time allowed his lawyer, Don Knight, and his team to do all the work that nobody did for almost 20 years. And so they worked and worked and worked, but they still had the problem with the time limits. All the doors to the courts are legally closed. So it's like, what do you do when you have all this evidence and nobody's willing to even hear what you found? So that's why he then started approaching the legislators to let them know, we have a problem here. We have all this evidence of innocence and we can't do anything with it. You guys write the laws, you guys are in charge of the laws, do something. At first, they didn't want to hear it either. They thought, innocent people don't get sentenced to death. That doesn't happen. You have appeals, you have a process, this doesn't happen. And that took years, They didn't want to hear it. And slowly they started listening and looking at evidence. And eventually they started saying, hold on, what's going on here? There's this happening, and this happening, and this. And they started talking to witnesses and doing their own investigation. And now we have 62 legislators, primarily conservative, pro-death penalty lawmakers, who have done the work and said, we support the death penalty, but we don't support executing innocent people. And we believe we have an innocent man and we don't support that. And they have done everything within their power now as legislators to try and ensure that doesn't happen and that we are able to get Richard out of there. So what they were able to do, which has never happened in American history in any other case, is they got this law firm to do their own independent investigation, because they wanted to say, this is not from a defense counsel who you can say has a vested interest. Let's get somebody completely independent that has no dog in this fight. They can talk to the state, they can talk to the defense, talk to everybody, and let's see what they have to say. So they appointed them, and that was over 30 attorneys, ex-prosecutors, you name it, from around the country. They all got together and they put in over 3,000 hours into this, and they completely pulled the case apart. And they came to the same conclusion. They said, Richard should have never been in prison. This should have never happened. And no reasonable jury, if they heard all the evidence that was never presented, would have ever found him guilty. And they've stayed in this with us ever since, pushing and pushing, and they've continued to work and they've continued to uncover things. But we have the same problem with the deadlines. The doors to the courts are always closed, and that's been the problem. So the previous Attorney General, we had some hope for a little while there that he was going to do the right thing, and he didn't. And that was, the biggest blow in the world when legally you meet every criteria. He even conceded we met the criteria of withheld evidence, and to know that that was still not enough was just so disheartening. It was disheartening also for the legislators who had so much faith in our system and the court system that they helped build in a lot of ways. And for them to also see that, I think it was a reality check, to put it mildly, and they never thought it would be this hard. They couldn't believe what we were up against, and it's galvanized them all the more. But ironically, the way that worked out pushed us into the new Attorney General's term. And he was courageous enough to do what the previous Attorney General would not do. And that was order his own independent review and look at the evidence himself and appoint a special counsel to look at everything. And they now too have come to the same conclusion as everybody. So it's been layers and layers and layers, and that's what's never happened before. There's no other innocence case that's been as investigated, as pulled apart by all these separate people who have all now come to the same conclusion. So a couple weeks ago, the Attorney General ordered the case thrown out. We needed to vacate and ordered a new trial. And ordinarily, that's all it should take. And the court ordinarily would basically rubber stamp that. And that would be it, but that's not what they did on Thursday, and they refused to that. So that has never happened. That's a very unique situation. So from that now, we're in this bizarre situation where on Wednesday, we're having a clemency hearing where we're basically asking to commute a sentence that the Attorney General is asking to throw out, which really doesn't make a lot of sense for anybody, including the parole board. I think it's for everybody. It's
to the parole board to go to the.
Yes,
parole board
on
at this point.
Wednesday. On Wednesday, we're doing that. So it's this very strange situation for everybody involved as to we're all there trying to mitigate something that we're all agreeing shouldn't be there in the first place. So it's a strange situation. So that's what will be happening. But that's also a tough situation because the board automatically, the way that's set up, it's very difficult to get clemency recommendations. They tell you up front they don't evaluate evidence. They're not there to decide guilt or innocence issues. So the whole setup is really not appropriate for this case to begin with. But procedurally, it's what we have to do. So we have to face that. And then on Friday, the Attorney General filed to the US Supreme Court along with the defense team. They've all filed jointly based on what the Oklahoma court did here, trying to get them to do what he's asking, which is to throw it all out. So we'll see what happens with that. But until that happens, we're in this kind of holding pattern, waiting for action. And we have an execution date on May 18th. And so that's looming overhead while we wait for this to go through. So it's been a trying time to say the very least. Very, very trying. But we also have tremendous hope. And I think that's what brings us back to faith and together. That's really, truly what's gotten us through up until this point is leaning on each other, the love we have for each other, and that shared faith. You know, saying our prayers together every night, taking part in our service every Sunday here, and just always holding on to that. You know, on Friday, Richard told me, he says, I've never felt my faith so shaken as I do now. And it was a hard moment. But we get back up, and that's always been our thing. We just gotta get up and keep going. And he did. And we're doing that now, but it's finding what gets us through. And that is what will continue to get us through what we face ahead.
How are you doing?
It's hard. It's very, very hard.
I can't imagine.
Yes, it's hard. And I've made the crazy decision to try and maintain law school while we're doing it. Which
You'll have
many
more
times.
experience
Yes,
than anybody
yes.
that's at law school.
It is. It's very strange. But in a weird way, I find that helps me in some ways. It helps keep me occupied, helps keep my mind occupied a little bit. I think sometimes when you overthink things, that's when things become even more overwhelming than they are. So it keeps me busy, and ironically, it keeps Richard busy because he studies with me. We bounce things off each other, so it keeps him occupied as much as it does me too. So I think as husband and wife, we just try and figure out how to get through everything together, and that's also something that we figure out how to get through together.
I remember, I don't know how many of you have been through the disciple classes. Reverend David and Reverend Sarah, she was still here. They were both leading disciple Bible classes, and I was in that. I remember my friend Leslie, she was in there. And that must have been 2013,
Yeah.
because I remember David telling us in class, he says, there's a man who has contacted me from prison who is interested in following along with this. So he said, I'm taking him some of the disciple Bible books. Obviously he Zoom and all, none of that stuff existed at that time. And he was like, so he can't go along, but we're gonna give him the lessons, we're gonna tell him what's going on. And he said, I'm gonna go visit him. So it must have been around that time.
Yes.
And it didn't click until later that that was Richard. He was
Yeah.
going down there and that's when he met Richard, because he said he's expressed interest in
Mhm.
joining the church. I was like, oh my gosh, that's,
Yes,
and a
yes.
lot has happened.
It
since
has,
then.
it has.
Wow.
Are there any other avenues?
Yeah, it's, I think what gives us the most hope right now is that we have the Attorney General, who has now taken this stand and has committed to seeing it through within his powers, which,
And didn't he say, I'm not going to?
yes, yes, he
Right, I
made
thought
he made
He
a,
quoted a very big quote saying,
Yes.
I'm not going to
he did, he took a,
kill a man that
yes,
needs to have a whole,
yep,
I think he said not saying that he's innocent, but he
Yes,
thinks he
which
needs a
we
whole
know,
trial, right?
yes.
But that he needs to actually have a
he
legit.
says we need to go have this, we need to have a new trial, that everything that's been uncovered.
Is still approachable?
The biggest problem with that, which again, I think along the way, everybody has discovered that people don't have the power that people
That
think they have.
Yeah, okay.
And a lot of people in Oklahoma over the years always say, well, doesn't the governor have pardon power? No, the governor does not have
The
pardon.
parole board has.
They have to
They're
recommend
the
it.
only one that can do clemency. In Oklahoma, if you wanted a pardon, you have to be out of prison for at least 10 years is the recommendation.
Oh, my God.
So really, when you see in other states, the governors that use pardon power, it's not those situations. It's situations in these type of dire situations where we need intervention. So there's these constant, it's kind of exposing all the
Backwardness.
yeah, very basically, of the way it's been set up. I mean, I've been almost calling it lately, it's almost like this kind of Frankenstein procedure that has been put into place and nobody has control over it. And it's so hard.
And it sounds like nobody knows what the whole,
Yes.
what it truly is.
It's along the way, it's been constructed in this way, and nobody ever put the, break glass in the case of emergency kind of switch.
Right.
And everybody's like, wait a minute, I don't have the power to do this, he doesn't have the power to do this. So it's been this kind of crazy thing of how do we pull one man off a conveyor belt that's moving so fast to execution. Our hope in that is that everybody who has the power to make these changes have learned all the problems and going forward will
Fix it.
fix things. Unfortunately, we get to be the guinea pigs in the test case to expose all these things. So that's the problem as far as that goes, is there is no pardon power, which a lot of people always wonder about that. So really it's clemency. So the parole board on Wednesday, we would need at least 3 votes. And then that would be sent to the governor's office. And then the governor has the decision to accept or deny whatever they send to him. But that's also limited as to what the recommendations can be and
3 votes out of how many?
out of 5, and this is the problem is we already have 1 recused, which already makes it
So,
even lesser. So,
if you got 3 out of the 4 people that would
Yes.
be involved.
and that's also been an argument that that's fundamentally unfair, that we're already 1 vote down. And because it also counts as an automatic no vote, which is also not fair. But that gentleman is married to the prosecutor in the case who's at the heart of a lot of the wrongdoing, which is why he's not allowed to be
Which,
part of this.
okay, so that makes sense.
Which is good.
Yes,
Has
yes,
the recent Court of Appeals,
yes.
they have obviously filed for rehearing.
They went ahead and what they did is they found that the US Supreme Court, they took that directly up there.
But they didn't file in the Court of Criminal.
No, they didn't, no.
So the Court of
He's a
Criminal.
former state legislator.
Okay. So you know.
The Court of Criminal Appeals says there's a hard and fast
Mhm.
time and we're
Too far past.
without our power to. So they have certain deadlines that are
Right,
Mandated
statute,
statute.
not deadline.
Mandates.
You can't buy like filing your petition in there.
right.
But there's an unreported case in the last 2 or 3 months arising out of McGirt in the Court of Criminal Appeals,
Mhm.
in which the district attorney in the 20th Judicial District failed to timely appeal a ruling of the district court in a McGirt
Okay.
case.
Okay,
In other words, to send someone back.
right, interesting.
This Court of Criminal Appeals several months after the drop dead deadline, you can't go past this deadline, we have no jurisdiction.
Right.
Since it's a matter of equity,
Interesting.
we're going to hear this case and reversed to cut the district attorney. It's an unreported case.
Interesting, okay.
But
Okay.
it is, and I can get you the name of it.
Yes, it'd
but
be
they
interesting.
have a long discussion, these same 5 judges,
Interesting.
on why we do have jurisdiction.
Yeah,
And now philosophically, I wasn't involved in the case, but
Sure.
philosophically, I object to what they did
mhm,
because if I'm appealing and I miss the deadline,
Right.
that's too bad. In this case, the district attorney missed the deadline by months.
right.
And they said,
That-
well, we need to look at this as a matter of equity, and they've never really done that before.
Right.
They've done
Seems
it,
to
the
be.
same 5 have done it in the last couple of months.
Interesting.
Unfortunately, as they will do, it's an unreported case.
Right. And
But
that's
their
what they
argument,
did in.
their argument is there, and that's why I asked on rehearing, I'd throw that back at them and say, because it sounds like they just said, time's up, we can't do anything about it, our hands are tied.
Pretty much.
And when you talk about, well, that's what they
Right.
said, we have no jurisdiction to hear this. When you talk about people not having the power to do it, they have the power to do it, they didn't do it.
And that's it. That court especially they have the
They have
power
more power.
to do exactly what the Attorney General asked them
So
to do.
when was the last decision made
Thursday.
Thursday. It was
Thursday.
by the Court of Criminal
Yes,
Appeals?
yes.
Well, they still have time to file for rehearing.
Yes, but the thing with them is there's a lot of, what I think's been uncovered, especially in the Attorney General's, when he appointed his special counsel to look into everything. They've uncovered some other things that were very, I think, problematic to anybody as to how we could ever get a fair shot with that court. They asked one of the judges to recuse because he was basically a mentor to, again, the same prosecutor whose husband is on the Pardon and Parole Board, who's the one at the center of destroying evidence.
I would say, didn't they destroy the
Yes.
evidence? I mean,
There
You
was,
don't do that when,
even if they're not executed. should they?
Exactly.
And
that blew me away. I
They had
couldn't
a-
believe, and
right before a second trial, they had all the key evidence that Oklahoma law says you have to keep even after somebody's executed. You can
I
never
figured you
destroy
would
it.
never get rid of that,
That's
right?
what it says, and they changed the case number and had it destroyed, saying all appeals are up, right before they were going into a second trial with all the key evidence. So everybody's been
There to
finger
me
pointing,
is-
yes, but they've basically said that's the
So
prosecutor
what?
came from. Yeah, and it's scary, and then they've also found what happened, which was key with the Attorney General taking his action, was that under the previous Attorney General's term, there was enough pressure from legislators and everyone to let us see the evidence, because Oklahoma technically has an open file policy that they haven't been committed to. And Reed Smith, the independent firm, had asked both sides. They said, if you have evidence of his guilt, let us see it, hand it over. They refused to hand anything over. So finally they said, okay, you can look at some of our evidence. And so the defense team went there and there wasn't much there. And there were things that they knew should have been there that weren't there. So that was a request then made to Attorney General Drummond. Let us see the evidence that we know was supposed to be there a few months ago that we weren't able to see. And in doing that, they found another box, which they called Box 8, which was all the pieces that they had ordered removed before the defense team was looked at. And all that evidence in there were things like memos showing the prosecutor broke the sequestration orders, where she was speaking to their key witness, who is the guy that basically makes the whole case, who made a deal to save his own life. He's the one who committed the crime, admits to committing the crime.
Right.
He's tried to take it back, and they've always told him, keep your mouth shut, or you'll be on death row. But all the things she was supposed to turn over about that the problems she's noting and to make sure in the second trial, his testimony was lining up to her witnesses and all these things that they were supposed to turn over. So all of that's been uncovered, and by law, those were all things they needed to turn over that were never turned over. So, but again, that's one of the judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals. He basically was almost like a mentor to her. So we asked for that judge to recuse himself, as it's hard to imagine he could be fair in ruling on this. When he had such a key role with her and her husband, he refused to recuse himself. So then there's the Assistant Attorney General, who was basically the state prosecutor in the appeals for 15 years. He's one of the key clerks at that court. We also asked him to remove, he refused. So the whole court's a little bit stacked against us, to say the least. And it just seems impossible to get them to do anything that's fair, even though we meet all the legal criteria, it's just being ignored. So we're hoping another court will step in, whether that's the US Supreme Court or another court, we're hoping somebody intervenes.
Now, the guy that you
Yes.
referred to that actually killed the
Yes,
motel manager, plea deal, and he got a life sentence.
Yes.
In deference to execution.
Yep.
But you said he wanted to recant his testimony. So they have the power to reverse his life sentence and put him back on again.
They just tell them.
Yeah, right?
they scare him.
But they won't allow him to officially
But
recant
they
his
can't
story.
re-sentence him, right? I mean,
Say again?
they couldn't re-sentence him.
No, but I think.
Right.
Why didn't he do
But
it?
it's a fear, right?
So what happened was
What's
is
the
they
team up, though?
found,
They're not gonna tell
Well,
him.
he said,
Yes.
well,
But
but his testimony is what convicted
I know.
Richard in the first place.
and they pulled that apart, and that was basically part of why the Attorney General took his action, is they said finally, we cannot rely on what
Because
this
that's
guy
the only
said.
evidence, right,
That's it.
that they had
That's
against
it.
Richard was this testimony
It's
by
all
this
from
man
him.
who says,
Yep.
I don't want that to be my testimony.
Right, it's all from him. And they uncovered exactly what happened, exactly how the crime went down now. The entire thing has been pulled apart by all these different people. And the Attorney General finally said, yes, we cannot rely on this witness is compromised. We can't let this conviction stand, let alone an execution move forward, based on what this guy has to say. The problem is what they were able to find was back around the time of the destroyed evidence before that second trial, he was trying to take it back. He was contacting his lawyers and he said, I need to clear my conscience in so many words. And he said, if you don't respond to me, I'm gonna write to Glossip's lawyers. And he was saying he needed to speak up. And then very quickly, it seemed the prosecutors came to see him. And then we have the letters his attorney sent back to him, which were, keep your mouth shut or you'll be on death row yourself. So.
But I thought they couldn't,
They can't, they were lying.
Daryl's saying you can't change that sentence once he's received
No,
it.
they can't.
but
So
it's-
why didn't he go ahead?
But it's the fear for him, he doesn't.
Your problem is not factual, it's procedural.
Yes, yes, our problem is that.
Well, that's why even in the Supreme Court, if this Court of Criminal Appeals Thursday said we don't have the authority to do that, their own rulings, that needs to be raised too.
Right. There's so much, there's just so much that,
But as I say, it's an unpublished opinion, and if
Yes.
you're unaware of the opinion,
I'm curious to know what
Right.
that is. Yeah,
I can't recite it. but
Right,
I
right.
can have it to you, and
yes. I'm
it's on my
curious.
computer, so.
Okay, I'll go hunting for it
So it's
myself.
retrievable, you could come up with it, Daryl.
Well, if you're going to Supreme Court, once this court ruled, you have 30 days to ask for reconsideration. And generally, that is perfunctorily denied.
Right,
But it's a procedure. You must raise it or you waive it.
right,
If you're going to the Supreme Court, I'd raise it and let them defend to say, our hands are tied. It's procedurally, they didn't make the deadline. When in fact, just in the last couple of months, they have said, we're not bound by the deadline as a matter of equity. We're going to waive, I guess, I don't think they use the word waive, but we're going to disregard this procedural deadline that
So it sets a precedent
is.
for them.
hard and fast, and it's
Right.
something that hasn't happened. Because I have been the victim of and seen, if you miss a certain deadline, you're out of luck. And they won't consider the facts or any other procedures.
Right.
But in just the last couple of months, they have in fact done that. So if they now turn around and say, well, we can't do it, they can do it. They have done it.
I think that's the biggest problem with them is getting them to do the things that they should do, that they do
That they
have the
can
power
do.
to do.
They can't,
Well, they deny they have the power.
but they obviously do.
Yeah, they do.
In the state's case that I'm talking about, they had a lengthy opinion.
Right.
So equity
Yes.
is equity.
We're gonna do it as a matter of equity, and that's not an equity court.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's been the thing so much in this whole case is always the things that should happen, that are supposed to happen, and then somehow people are just, going outside their lanes, their bounds, doing what they need to do, and it's like, well, who can check them? And that's kind of, I think at this point is we need somebody to intervene.
What was John O'Connor's problem? Because it didn't seem like he was at all cooperative or facilitative or receptive to the case. I kind of, from what I picked up, I kind of consider him part of the bolt in the gear works. you
Right.
know?
Well, initially, there was hope from the legislators who were supportive that he was gonna do the right thing and he was gonna look at the case, and it was to ask him to order an evidentiary hearing. And so let's do that, basically, what are you afraid of? If you're confident in your case, let's have a hearing, let's hash it all out, let's put it all out there. And that was the request, and we were hopeful of that, and then at the last minute, he said no, he wouldn't have the evidentiary hearing. And then it started to be very contested between that office, and now what we know, now that we've gotten access, is that under his authority, they removed the evidence, so that was more withheld evidence that occurred under his term of things that were supposed to be uncovered. And the special counsel, I think he put it best when he ended his report, writing to Attorney General Drummond. He said, your action is the most courageous action because but for your election, Richard Glossip would be dead. So, and it's the truth. O'Connor was willing to let Richard die. So that was another, I think for Richard and I, we have this thing that even when the worst of the worst things happen, there's still sometimes something just bizarrely good has come out of it. And we try and take some comfort in that. And
All over
in
the
fall-
history of the case, he's, how many stays of execution?
This is the 9th execution date now. And in the last 10 months, we've had an active, that's another thing that has never happened in US history. We've been living with an active execution date for 10 months straight now. Almost, soon it'll be a year. And that doesn't happen. Execution dates are usually 30 days, 60 days, and that was another thing the Attorney General asked, was to remove the date, and the Court of Criminal Appeals said, no, you don't need the execution date removed. Even though he technically has the power to do that, they told him no. And that also doesn't happen ordinarily. So it's all of these
He
things.
seems very angry about it.
Yes.
Drummond seemed
Yes.
very, I mean, just from the quotes I read, which is
Yes.
glad.
Yes, well, I mean, we are, I think it's heartening for us that,
Very
okay,
angry about what
yes.
they said.
Yes, because ordinarily that doesn't happen. The Attorney General says this is what I want to do, and especially when both sides are in agreement.
Right.
That's usually, the court doesn't really have a place to step in when you have both sides are agreeing what they want to do. So this whole situation is unprecedented in so many ways, in the good ways, the bad ways. But it gives us hope, the action he's taken so far as Attorney General, that he will continue to see this through. We also have a new district attorney in Oklahoma County. I have a lot of faith in her ability to step up and do what she's able to do from her power, which is also limited like everyone else, but we have confidence with her in that office compared to her predecessor. So we have hope, and also the legislators, which is continuously growing, are also just outraged by what's happening. They've been watching this, and So we have a lot of people on our side, we have a lot of momentum, it's just a question of navigating this all and how we get to where we want to be with it.
So it's been appealed to the Supreme Court,
Yes.
filed
Yes,
to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
So what's that process now? How,
the waiting game is
so
basically the short
but
answer.
while it's
Yeah.
being appealed, what about the execution date?
So
What
that's kind
happens?
of the cruelty, I think, overall of death penalty cases and processes. It's a waiting game where the courts take their time, and in the process, you just have to
Just
go
sitting there
through
waiting
these
for
things. And for us, I think the thing too is that we went from the last few weeks when there was the order to vacate the sentence from the Attorney General. The next steps automatically were preparing for that. Ordinarily, that would be granted when an Attorney General does that. So the hope is finally this big bright light at the end of the tunnel. Yes. To then all of a sudden Thursday this happens. And then the prison comes in right away and says, uh-oh, that means the execution date is still on. They said we can't remove the execution date. Quick, we have to do our execution protocol. So they pull Richard out to do all the medical checks that they do when you have an execution date. They start checking your veins, they read to you how you're gonna die, what they're gonna use to kill you. And this is 9 times he's had to do this. And it's just psychologically having to go through that and the paperwork. So Friday, we sat hand in hand and we filled out the paperwork of who do you want in the room with you when you die? Who do you want to be there and for your last meal? All these horrible traumatic procedures, these rituals. And to go from the extreme of so close to finally being on the other side of this to now this, it's a big traumatic roller coaster to say the least.
At what
So,
point does it get sequestered where you can't go see him anymore?
we got that changed in December. It used to be 35 days. So the paperwork is still at the 35-day mark. They didn't do it at the 35-day mark, which is why they rushed to do it quickly on Thursday. Now it's a week before, so a week before May 18th is when all our contact visits will go, and it will all be behind glass from that point. So we're hoping something happens before we reach that point. But that's currently what we're looking at. And when that comes, it's lights are on you 24 hours a day. They take all your personal property. So you're basically little clothing, ice cold. He always talks about the lights are so bright up there you can see little ants walk across. They have a camera on you 24 hours a day, a guard posted outside your door. And all the things that give you any comfort in that situation are taken.
I guess they're worried you're gonna take that you won't let them kill you, you might do it yourself. They want
Yes, it's a lot of that. I think it's also they break
Beat 'em
people
down.
down and then that people don't fight it. And I think it's a big part of just
Takes them
breaking
down.
people down for that. And I think the interesting thing that I think some of the people in power making decisions don't realize also is the corrections officers in that prison, they pay attention to everything. They've known Richard for 26 years now. They care about him. There's officers every Friday, they're in the room with us 4 to 5 hours. They're very aware of what's happening. They are terrified by this. They ask me every week, you're stopping this, right? You guys are stopping this. And they've already said they will refuse to take him up there. They don't want to be part of this. They apologize for having to handcuff him. Every week, we're praying for you, our family's praying for you. So they're all very invested. So I think the people who are trying to push this through are not realizing the people that are tasked.
How many
to
are
go through it.
impacted by
Yes,
what they do?
they don't realize
don't
all of
think
these
about
people.
The Supreme Court justice with jurisdiction over the 10th Circuit can issue a staff.
Right,
That's perfunctorily
yes, so,
approved by the rest of the Supreme Court. That's probably what the next best thing to happen.
So
Who is that?
Justice Gorsuch, I
He can do
believe.
that.
I was just asking who, why don't we know who that
Yeah, I
is?
believe it's
It's on the Supreme
Gorsuch,
Court.
Justice Gorsuch has the 10th Circuit.
That'll be probably the next best thing to happen.
Yes, so we're hoping that the problem is, I say this to Richard all the time, because he's always, how quickly, and I think my answer to him is always, and it's the truth, it's never as quickly as we want. It's happening quickly, but it's not as quickly
As quick
as
as
we want, so,
For everything that you guys are going through.
yes, so it's,
Well, I don't think anybody truly, unless they've been through it, knows what that process is.
Right,
Right, I will freely, I used to
Yeah.
be wholeheartedly behind the death penalty, but several
Sure.
years ago, I was like, that's not, and I've read stuff and I'm like,
Sure.
that's wrong, that's not okay,
That's right.
that's not okay.
It seems like fundamentally structurally broken. Do you or he know people in the same predicament here in Oklahoma that are declaring their innocence? I mean, with evidence, and it just,
personally or just as a general statement?
just as, like, does he know anybody personally, but?
I think he did know who was exonerated, was Ron Williamson, was a well-known Oklahoma wrongful conviction case, and tied to that case, we're all out of Ada, Oklahoma, and Tommy Ward is still in prison. And he also had a situation where a lower court judge, he's not on death row, he's serving life. They ordered his release, and O'Connor, I believe it was the one who fought it, and the Court of Criminal Appeals shot them down also. So he's still currently in prison, but I believe that is also an innocence case that needs to be looked at. It's not as dire because he's not facing execution,
Right.
but that is a current case.
I
That's
apologize for
ongoing.
walking out.
No, absolutely.
I sing in the choir, so.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so important.
So you'll do what I never do. It's all the fun happens at trial.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Yes.
Methodist preachers are good at this. Howard Plowman, the first Methodist, helped get a person off death row.
Okay.
So,
Oh, wow.
so,
I think people always think prosecutors are for truth,
Right.
but they so often seem like they're just about winning, and today I won this one and I'm not gonna do about it.
Because then when they're up for election, they can tell us, I won 85% of the,
And they,
that sounds good to
we
us.
were able to hold
Yes.
them up and
Yeah.
And
That
it's
sounds
admitting
good
they
to
got
us.
it wrong.
Yeah.
That's the most difficult.
I think
piece of law, is
regardless of
admitting that.
your personal position or philosophy about the death penalty, the fact that DNA has exonerated so many
Right.
convicted killers is a case in and of itself that
Yes.
we maybe really need to reconsider
Mom says.
executing people in this
We
country.
found too many on death row that, like you said, that's what my mom always says, no, that's, we know there are people who didn't do it, that are on death row because DNA has said that they weren't the ones,
Right.
and no matter
Courts
how
are
many
wrong.
times.
Courts are
you
wrong.
get to go see him every Friday.
Yes, every Friday, so.
Unlimited time, and you said last week you
Not
were together,
unlimited.
well, 8 hours or 10, I didn't know
We
that
get about-
visitation, you got that much time.
Yes, we get about 5 hours every Friday. Sometimes we get more than that, but about 5 hours on average every Friday. And then we have a lot of phone time together. So we start the mornings together, drink coffee together. He takes the ride to class with me every morning, walks me into school. We have dinner over the phone every night together. You know, like I said, we do our Sunday service together, but we do all the things that married couples do. We go grocery shopping, and he helps me figure things out. When I have car problems, he's very good with cars, and he loves old cars. So.
Right there.
Yep, and he'll talk me through how to fix it over the phone, and so we figure things out. We have a lot of obstacles.
Do you care to
we get
tell
ready.
people a little bit about your personal background?
Yeah.
Are you a native Okie or?
No, I am not. I'm not. Because of this situation brought me to Oklahoma, so to be closer to Richard, because traveling back and forth was getting to be too much, and I just decided, all right, it's time to just be here, and we can have that visiting time every Friday without having to travel constantly. But I was living in Florida. I'm a paralegal, and I was working on death penalty cases as a paralegal for a long time. So that's how I became familiar with these cases, how I became familiar with Richard's case. And I sent him a Christmas card one year, because every year at Christmas time, I send Christmas cards to people incarcerated, mainly on death row, because I know most of those people have absolutely nobody. And I know what a difference that makes. You send a card, it's a little bit of light in such a dark place. And that's what I did. I sent him a Christmas card one year. And we just kind of exchanged some cards back and forth over time like that. Didn't think anything of it, certainly never in a million years. And I have no problem saying that ever expected to be in this situation. There's nothing romantic about it, absolutely not. But I think it's one of those things, he always says his father told him growing up, when you meet the person you are meant to be with, you will know, no matter where you are in life or what's going on or what you're facing, you will know. And we both had that moment, and it was difficult and scary given the situation, but we made that commitment that, all right, we're gonna do this together and give it our all, and we did, and we haven't looked back, and it's been amazing. I think despite these extraordinary circumstances, we have a really strong marriage, a strong bond, and that's a lot also what gets us through all of this, is just having each other and leaning on each other. So and it's what keeps us motivated and doing what we need to do going forward. It's just.
You were wed in the penitentiary?
Yes.
How did that take place? And what year, how long have you been together legally?
The process to get married in prison is quite a process, so we had to do quite a bit of paperwork. It took over a year to get it approved, but we got officially married last March, March 29th of last year. We wanted Reverend Wiggs to be the one to marry us, but that was a whole other process, so we had to go with the prison chaplain.
Prison chaplain.
But it was actually a chaplain who had met Richard in the county jail when he was first incarcerated and told him, "You don't belong here." And he knew it from then, and he stuck with him all those years.
That's great.
So
He was the one.
yeah, he was the one who was able to marry us, which was kind of special for him and for Richard as well. So we had Justin Jackson, a friend of ours who spoke at the forum when we had that last summer, was our witness along with his girlfriend. And, despite the setting, we got what we wanted out of that day. We were able to be together and exchange vows with each other and spend that time together and make that commitment. So despite the situation, it was still what we wanted together. And one of the legislators was able to ensure that he was able to hand me a bouquet of flowers, which that was what he wanted to do more than anything, and we were able to do that. So for him, that's something he hangs on to. And that was the first time I was able to touch his face, and nobody had touched his face in 25 years. And that was a big moment for him. And anybody who asks about the day we got married, that is what he will always tell everybody, was that. And it's those things that I think people take for granted, that they forget about, all these things that people don't think about, that when you're in these situations, all of a sudden take on a whole new significance. Yes.
Other questions, folks? You're a strong girl, Lee.
You are.
You are a very strong person.
Well,
And I don't know if she's spoken in service before.
yes,
You
yes.
guys were here when she did that. I would think that was the day of that forum.
No,
Was it?
we've done a few different things
Okay.
on different times, and not as eloquent as Reverend Wiggs.
You're very good. I think you're very good.
Great.
Very, very good.
Oh, he's amazing. I think the way he talks about Richard's case especially is nobody
It's
can
touched
get
him,
over
I
us.
know.
So yes. And,
I think the Rich will be receiving prayers from everybody in this class going forward.
well,
And
thank you.
best wishes. Hope
Yes.
that the system will do something right
Right.
in this
Yeah, I was
case.
shocked Thursday when I heard that on the radio.
I
I
know.
was shocked. I was like,
I know, and it's that ordinarily it wouldn't happen, and I think that's just been the maddening thing about it's so difficult to get where we are, and then these things happen that shouldn't be happening, but we're getting through it. And I think that the thing that I was telling Richard the other day is, every time we have this giant obstacle, by the time we get through it, we don't just get one step past it, we get like 10 steps past it. So we have this right now, but let's hope and pray that what comes of it will get us even more forward in one direction or the other towards where we're needing to go. So that's what we're trying to focus on, and we have a lot of amazing people fighting very, very hard right now, and we're leaning on that.
Are you a student at OCU or OU?
Oklahoma City. So yes, it's they've been amazing too. They've been very accommodating with I can't do things on Friday and they know that and they're rescheduling exams for me and everything, so.
You're basically doing a master's class in
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, so far beyond what
right.
she's learning in her classes.
classroom. Yeah.
Right.
She's getting,
It's definitely been interesting.
I'm glad that they've been flexible.
They have, they've been very supportive and very, very, very helpful with everything.
You'll probably be on staff there someday.
Yeah.
they teach the class.
Yeah.
Sue, just you know how long you want to practice that?
Yes, I think it's one of these things when you experience it, even for me, just experiencing it from a paralegal end was so shocking. And I think, like what you were saying about the death penalty, and it's one of those things, once you start looking at it and realizing, and then especially when you see the stories of the people there, you start to realize everything wrong, and not just in innocent cases, but just across the board. And that really motivated me, especially all the people that just need help. And there's not a lot of people willing to do that type of work. And that motivated me to go to law school and basically equip myself with those tools to be able to do more to help people in those really hopeless situations, you know.
What year are you in? Did you say?
I'm in my second year.
Second year.
Yes. Yes, and it's the way this happened, I have my final exams in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, my
On
God.
top of all of everything.
The timing, yes, was a little interesting, to
Course.
say the least, so.
I don't know too much about law school, but I bet when you guys do all the boring business law stuff, you probably just want to like.
Tune that
Let's get back to criminal
out.
stuff.
Right, I know. I think the irony is, Richard's learning way more about contract law and property law, all these things. So he helps me study and we'll go back and forth and he'll quiz me, all right, what's this, what's that, going into exams, but we've made it work, and so that's what we'll be doing going forward. is-
Should have done well in criminal procedure.
Yes, I would hope.
Where did you go to law school?
Excuse me.
Where did you go to law school?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have a niece that's going to law school next year at OCU.
Okay.
And a grandson that's going to be a freshman there playing baseball.
Oh, wow.
Was he gonna play OU?
Yeah.
All over?
OCU.
OCU.
My mother and my father graduated from OCU.
Okay.
The whole family thing going.
Yeah.
So if you have any trouble with those professors, let us know. We have endowed scholarships down at OCU too. Thank you, Scott. So just let us know if we can intercede and intervene.
Like
Give
it's,
me a email address either.
Yes.
For an attorney.
Yeah.
I'll send you that
perfect.
case.
No, I'm happy to do that. I'd be interested to know what that is actually. So yeah.
Well, it's just a procedural, it has nothing to do with facts.
Right. But I'd definitely be
But
curious.
what I'm
That's what's
interested
important right now, though.
I know those guys on the Court of Criminal Appeals.
Right.
And I want to see them explain why equity doesn't apply
Mm-hmm.
when they said
But it did here.
It did there.
it in this case.
Yes.
The prosecutors.
Equities
I know.
are needed.
I'm hoping these decisions are just shining more a light on that court right now as to what's going on and really kind of showing this is why Richard has been there for 26 years.
Did they issue an opinion?
They did. In the fall, it wasn't. It was unpublished opinion when they rejected everything in the fall.
Was it an opinion or just an order?
The other day, it was a short opinion that they put out on Thursday.
And it was, we don't have jurisdiction because of the time.
It was a few different things. They had one part which, they didn't put it this way, but essentially it kind of came down to, this is actually Richard calling. I can put him on.
Yeah,
You
put him on
wanted to-
speaker, by all means.
Yes. Really wanted to speak to everybody, so it kind of works out.
Hope he was tuned in on Zoom this morning, but we'll get him the recording if not.
Is that airplane?
Kind of, he'll come right back.
Don't let us hold anybody up that headed up to late service, folks, if anybody needs to leave.
Prison phone systems are terrible, so
Thanks.
he'll call right back. I know, that was, he really wanted to be able to speak to everybody.
Sorry you missed his first call.
Oh, we're used to all I think we have 3 different phone numbers we use to kind of
Try to get through.
Cut through.
deal with all the nonsense of the prison phone system and collect calls and the whole 9 yards, so yes, but I think for him, he's watched the service, he knows Reverend Wiggs, and it's just, he feels part of the church, but I think he feels like he would like to be able to connect with people more in a way, so.
Well, maybe that opportunity will eventually
Yes,
come.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, so it's, his faith has always been really central to him for all these years, and especially when he was alone, because he was alone for almost 18 years with nobody, absolutely no one, no lawyers, no nothing.
Did he grow up in a faith?
Yes.
What denomination or church or?
I believe it was, his family was a little divided. That's what I'll say. And I know when he got to the county jail, he explored his faith in different ways as well. But he also has Sister Helen Prejean, who's a Catholic nun, who's well known for her anti-death penalty work. She was a strong supporter of his, and in a way, she also was a big part of helping stop the execution attempts in 2015. And so he's connected to a lot of different
That's great.
people.
That's great.
But for him, he connected the most with Boston Avenue and the Methodist Church. For him personally, and I know he spoke a lot with Reverend Wiggs about that as to why Boston Avenue specifically was really where he felt at home in watching the services and listening to him every week.
Watching on TV is, I
Yes.
ended up coming down and doing it in person.
Oh, I used to watch.
watch.
Yeah, and it's funny because my mother lives in California and she started watching online as well to be part of it with us. And she said, Boston Avenue is amazing. So it's everybody that seems to join in kind of this thematic of it. So yes.
Do you think you guys will get an answer on Wednesday from the Pardon and Parole? or
Yes,
it
it will be instant.
It'll be
It will
instant.
be instant, which is a little scary.
Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Do you know?
Morning,
In the morning.
first thing in the morning.
First thing.
So the lawyers will present, I will address the board, Richard will address the board. So it's a little intimidating.
Oh, I
It's definitely a little intimidating and we don't know, we don't know what they're gonna do. So we just gotta go in there and give it our all, really. So yes, but that will happen Wednesday unless something happens Monday or Tuesday to stop it. Because the way the law is set up, when you have an execution date, you have to have a clemency hearing. So even though everybody's in agreement, we shouldn't be having one, basically procedure forces us to have one. So yes. Yes.
Well, thank you for.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
I think some people missed the roll call.